Greetings and welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to be talking about universal screening, dyslexia screening, and plan development. I'm Denise Gibbs and I'm happy to share this information with you today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, please contact me by email as you see the email address on the first slide, or you might visit the Alabama Scottish Rite Foundation Learning Center's website. We have a list of possible webinars and a way for you to schedule those should those be something you would find to be beneficial. This particular webinar has been designed to provide you with professional development that's consistent with the professional development requirements of the dyslexia amendments to the Alabama Administrative Code. You see the specific place in the Administrative Code where those professional development requirements are listed, and you'll see this reference to the Administrative Code throughout the presentation. Just want to mention the Dyslexia Resource Guide that's available to help you with information about screening and other topics in the area of dyslexia services. This resource is available at the website of the Alabama Department of Education. Most recently, we added an appendix to that resource guide that gives you a list of any updates that have been made to the guide since it was initially published on the web in September of 2015. This is I'm going to say living document in that we make changes to it, we make additions and so forth from time to time as we discover additional information and resources that we think would be beneficial. Screening is defined in the screening requirement is defined in the Administrative Code 20C, and it states that students will be screened for characteristics of dyslexia using screening instruments currently in place for use in public schools. In screening for dyslexia, we've set up a framework, if you will, that's based on the definition of dyslexia that's also found in our Alabama Administrative Code. And what we're going to be doing with our screening is we're going to be looking for certain skills for students. And we're going to go to that definition where it states that dyslexia is characterized by difficulties with accurate or fluent word recognition, by poor spelling, and by decoding abilities. So these challenges in these three areas are skills that we are going to specifically screen for our students in grades 1 through 12. We'll look at some early literacy skills that are predictive of dyslexia challenges for our kindergarten students. We'll be talking about those specifically as we go through this information in this webinar. If you look in the resource guide, you'll see this particular note, and that has to do with the very important idea that we don't want for our dyslexia services or RTI framework to serve as something to delay special education evaluations if, in fact, a specific learning disability is suspected. So you see that reference here in this slide and also in the Dyslexia Resource Guide. What do we learn from screening? One thing we learn is not a diagnosis of dyslexia. When a student fails a dyslexia screening, we don't have a diagnosis of dyslexia at that point. What we do know from our screening is that based on these results, a student would be likely to benefit from the dyslexia services that we describe in our administrative code and certainly also in our resource guide. If the student does not make expected gains and we don't see growth from our dyslexia services, then we might need to consider the possibility that the student would need more intensive and individualized services, such as might be available through special education. As the student is being considered for special education eligibility, it is possible that additional assessments might be given, and in fact a diagnosis of dyslexia could be made as the underlying cause of the specific learning disability that is being identified. But through our screening, we do not diagnose dyslexia. And in any communication that we send out to parents regarding our screening and the results of our screening, we want to be clear that we are talking about your child has been screened, and the characteristics and skills that we have observed through our screening make us feel confident that your student would benefit from these particular services. And so it's screening to see if services are warranted, not screening to create a diagnosis. So rest assured, you are not diagnosing dyslexia through your dyslexia screening. Now let's talk about the dyslexia screening process. In deciding who needs dyslexia screening, we're going to think of a two-step screening process, with the first part being your universal screener that you do as part of RTI. In Alabama, what we've got is we've got a number of tools being used for universal screening across the state. And if the student scores below the benchmark that your district has set, if it's 25th percentile or some other benchmark score, if they score below that benchmark, then they need to be screened for dyslexia. And that would be true of your kindergarten students as well, with the caveat being that we don't want to screen students for dyslexia in kindergarten prior to the winter or the spring benchmark. So if the student scores below benchmark in the fall screening for kindergarten, you would go ahead with whatever typical RTI services you would normally be providing. If, however, they continue to score below that benchmark in the winter, then you would consider dyslexia services and dyslexia screening at that point. We'll get into that in just a few minutes. And I saved the most important point on this slide for last, and that is that please consider that poor or failing grades are not in any way a prerequisite for dyslexia screening or dyslexia services. It does not say in the administrative code that students who are making failing grades will be screened for dyslexia or will be eligible for dyslexia services. It simply says that students will be screened for dyslexia. So if in the past you have thought or considered that failing grades or poor grades had to be part of the picture to see if a student needed RTI services, rest assured that that is not true, and certainly not true for students who have who need to be screened for dyslexia. Scoring below the district benchmark on the universal screener is the only criteria really that needs to be considered. Now, if you have a multi tool screening process in place in your district where you consider grades and you consider teacher recommendations and you consider other factors like attendance and what have you, those can create a very strong screening protocol. However, universal screening protocol. However, not any one of those, like grades, should be used as a stumbling block to being able to move forward with your dyslexia screening. So here's the framework for dyslexia screening for kindergarten, and it's very straightforward. We want to look at these 4 early literacy skills that you're recognizing probably right away are part of the DIBELS screening tool that's used in probably about 70% or more of the districts in Alabama. We look at the student's ability to name letters quickly, letter sounds quickly, to segment words into phonemes quickly, and their ability to read nonsense words. If the student scores in the below benchmark area in 3 of these 4 skills, the problem-solving team then needs to swing into action to develop a dyslexia services plan for the student. Now, the framework for dyslexia screening for grades 1 through 12 has 4 different parts to it. The first part would be to have the student read an on-grade level passage for at least 1 minute. You can do this 3 times and take the median score, and that will increase your reliability. And what you're going to be doing is calculating their percentage of words read correctly. And so in that, you're going to take the words read correctly and divide that by the total words attempted, and that will give you your percentage of accuracy. Additionally, the student needs to be screened for the following skills: decoding of nonsense words, decoding of real words, and spelling. So those 4 skills. Now, these are some examples that are useful for dyslexia screening for kindergarten and for grades 1 through 12. Many of these tools that we're going to be talking about are available for free or for a very minimal cost. As we begin to look at the tools, I'd like to show you from the Dyslexia Resource Guide an organizing or graphic organizer kind of form that will help you analyze the results of your screening and, in fact, create your dyslexia services plan. This is called the Dyslexia Screening and Needs Assessment Profile. This is the one for grades 1 through 12. And you can see that it has identifying information at the top, including those people who are participating in the PST meeting. And here's a good place to put their names or their initials or whatever. And you want to make sure that in that group that's participating in analyzing these results and coming up with a plan, that at least one teacher who knows the student and who is familiar with the student's work is there to take part in the meeting. Grade level problem solving teams work very well to ensure that the teachers who are making these decisions know the students for whom these plans are being developed quite well. All right, so then you've got a date for the team meeting, and then a very important date that you're going to indicate, which is the date that you shared these results and the plan with parents. In the administrative code, it's also a requirement that's explicitly just stated that we will be informing parents of the results of the screening and the goals of the dyslexia services plan and the components of that plan. So you've got a date that you communicated this information with the parents. Now, on your form, you're going to have a place to put the name of the assessment tool that you're using, and then each skill that you're assessing. So there's the 3 skills: sight word, phonemic decoding, and written spelling. And then we've got boxes in which to put the particular score that the student achieved. And so if you're using a tool that uses standard scores or percentile scores, if the standard score is below 80, then the score would go in this box. If the percentile is at or below the 10th percentile, then it would go there as well. If the student is scoring more than 1 grade level below their assigned grade, it would also go in this box. If you're using a tool that gives benchmark, intensive, strategic as descriptors for the scores, then it gives you the words that you need to know which box to put those scores in. So you've got high risk, moderate risk, and low risk with all the different possible scores that would land you in that box. Now, the last part that you see here for the scores is the place where you're going to put the score from the passage reading. And if the student scores below the 92nd percentile, then, I'm sorry, not 92nd percentile, achieves less than 92% accuracy, on that passage reading, then the score is going to go in the frustration reading level. If they score between 92% and 98% accuracy, it's going to go in the instructional column. And then if they score 99 to 100%, then that is that they're at an independent reading level for that grade level passage. Then you've got your criteria on the form as well. If the student scores are in or below the moderate risk or frustration reading level, so those boxes are grayed out. If they score in 3 of the 4 skills in the gray boxes, then they need to be referred to the PST for determination of needed services, including dyslexia-specific intervention, accommodations, assistive technology, and classroom strategies. Now, down at the bottom part of this form, you have a place to record the dyslexia-specific intervention that the team decides, as well as the level and the schedule, and then the group size. You've also got a place to list any accommodations and specific assistive technology that the team feels would be helpful to the student, and then a place to record classroom strategies that specifically the team believes would be useful to the student. So there are 4 skills, or 4 components, if you will, of the dyslexia services plan, with intervention, accommodations, assistive technology, and multisensory classroom strategies. And this form is there to sort of serve as your dyslexia plan, as well as to summarize your screening results. Now, we have a similar form that we've created, and it's available in the resource guide for your kindergarten students. And so here's the kindergarten form, and very similar in terms of the information that's at the top, including the date to share the results with parents, and then the tools that you used. If you used Dibbles, if you used AimsWeb, if you used EasyCBM, there are a variety of tools that we'll be looking at in a minute. And those these are the skills, though, that you're looking for. And again, you have the grayed out boxes, and if the student scores in the below benchmark or well below benchmark on 3 of the 4 skills, then the student should be referred to the PST for determination of needed intervention services, including all of the things that you see down here at the bottom. And so we've got the same thing that you had on the other one. So this is your kindergarten form, and then we have a separate form for grades 1 through 12. All right, so sources for kindergarten screening materials. We have Dibbles, we have AimsWeb, we have EasyCBM. There's another tool called Phonological Awareness Literacy Screening for Kindergarten, or PALS, was developed in Virginia. So if your district is already using any of these for universal screening, then basically you just analyze the results of the universal screening with Dibbles or AimsWeb or whatever, and then determine if in fact the child through universal screening has also failed the dyslexia screening. So since we're looking just at early literacy skills for kindergarten, the process is quite straightforward and very simple to complete. Now, let's look at the process and tools that we are going to use for our grades 1 through 12 dyslexia screening. The first thing to begin with is probably having them read an on-grade level passage. And in this webinar, we're going to go over sources for these passages. One that I particularly like is found at Intervention Central. It allows us to create passages for students in grades 1 through 12, and it doesn't cost any money to use this. And we can use passages from the very textbooks and materials that we expect in our district for students to read at each of the different grades for students. So again, when you're done with this, the criterion is that if the student scores below the 92% accuracy, then they will be considered to have failed this part of the screening. I want to show you briefly how Intervention Central works. If you click this link, it will take you to the website at interventioncentral.org, and it will take you to this fluency passage generator. And I'm going to show you how easy this is to work. I've got a file prepared on my desktop called Pioneers, and I'm going to find Pioneers and open it. This is just a passage of text that I know was taken from some 8th grade reading materials in a local school district. So I'm going to copy that text, and I'm going to go back to Intervention Central, and I'm going to paste that text in the window for the passage. I'm going to say the title is Pioneers. And for author, I'm going to this will make it easy for me. I'm going to say 8th grade. All right, so this is an 8th grade passage, and the title is Pioneers. And I'm going to ask down here for it to download this as a PDF file. And so it will download it. I can open the PDF file, and you're going to see that what it has done is it took that passage that I pasted into the little window, and it turns it into, this is the score form that you would use, and it counts the number of words that you have cumulatively by the time you get to the end of each row, just like it does with Dibbles, except now we're using an 8th grade passage from materials that we're actually teaching from. And you could do this for every single grade if you wanted to. Here's what the student's copy looks like. No numbers or any of that, no scoring area. So you would have one copy of this for your 8th graders to use, and then for each student that you're scoring, you'd need to have one of these score sheets. So anyway, a very efficient and easy way to get your passages for each grade level from Intervention Central. You can also obviously obtain grade level passages all the way up to the 6th grade from the Dibbles passages that you probably already have in your district. There's another book that I use frequently. It's called Assessing Reading Multiple Measures is the second edition, and in Assessing Reading Multiple Measures, it's filled with reading assessments, and they in fact have some passages that go up to 6th grade in terms of your oral reading fluency and accuracy. So you can order this book from Amazon, and I'm not sure exactly what the cost is, but it's around $50 or $60. So those are sources for passages. The Assessing Reading Multiple Measures book, Dibbles, and then Intervention Central. I really like the idea of the Intervention Central because it allows me to use truly curriculum-based passages that come from the curriculum at our school. These are the passages that we expect our 7th graders or 5th graders or 8th graders or 12th graders to be able to read. And that is, to me, seems like a very valuable aspect. Now, when we're talking about assessing decoding skills, being able to decode nonsense words, I've got 3 different tools that we're going to look at. And the first one is the TOWER, the Test of Word Reading Efficiency. This particular test gives you standardized scores. It takes less than 1 minute to give this particular subtest, and it is very simple and quick and straightforward. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. And this is a sample kind of imaginary child, and this is the score sheet. You see the phonemic decoding. We're also going to use this for sight words. So I'm going to, and you see we've gotten the raw score. Then we looked it up in the table for a student in the 4th grade who is 9 years old, and we have that the percentile is 9th percentile with a scale score of 80, 5th percentile for phonemic decoding with a scale score of 75. We're able to combine those and get total word reading efficiency, but what we need for our dyslexia screening are both sight word and phonemic decoding efficiency. Now, when you look at the individual subtests, let's look at phonemic decoding because that's what we're talking about right now. What you see is this is the score form. The student would have looked at just some plates that had these nonsense words on them, and the student's having to read these. So IP, and if the student pronounced it like in the word tip, then they got it correct. With GA, they can either say gaw like in law, ga like in gap, or gay like in gate. So it allows for any one of those 3 to be acceptable, and you score it. Now, as you're looking at this, and remember that we're using this for students in grades 1 through 12, this is a really useful tool because it is normed for students all the way through school, all the way up into young adulthood. And we even have multisyllabic nonsense words that over here, like pelnador. And so in pelnador, you can see it's a multisyllabic word with lots of different ways that we can pronounce the different syllables. This tool is helpful. You're going to give the student 45 seconds to read as many of these nonsense words as possible, and then use the norm table to find out if the student then is scoring in the average range or in the significantly below average range. The same is true with the sight word subtest from the TOWER, which we'll look at on the next slide. And so you see here's the list of words, and you have an opportunity to score it with a 1 or a 0, and then you get a raw score. In this case, it was 52, and then you put that on the front of the protocol, the test protocol, and you've got your 52 raw score, which you looked up and you found gave you those scale scores. If you think back to that needs assessment profile that we're going to use, the graphic organizer, it'd be real simple to figure out which box to record those scores in. So that's the test of word reading efficiency, the phonemic decoding, and I also already showed you the sight word test. To give both parts, it takes 45 seconds for each of the subtests, so 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, and you're out of there. Now, another tool that you can use for nonsense words is free, and it is on this. The TOWER is not free. You have to buy that test, but the Lexercise tool is available free online. It also has 2 components, just like the TOWER. It does both nonsense words and real words. The nonsense words part of Lexercise is called the Z Screener, and so I'm going to quickly take you to their website, and we'll see how Lexercise works. So you see, you come to this and it says screen your child. So just click to screen your child. And it gives you some instructions. Make sure to turn up the volume on your device. The Lexercise screener will take about 5 to 10 minutes. You will score your students' pronunciations of the nonsense words and real words. If the student answers I don't know or doesn't respond within 10 seconds, mark no response. If you're uncertain of a word's pronunciation, just click hear it. Now that's obviously not while the child is sitting there, but that's something you would do before you give the student the test. So then we can start the screener. Here's the Z screener, and we'll begin. So the student is looking at this, and they're going to pronounce either the word correctly or incorrectly. And if the student says it correctly, then I'm going to do the plus sign on my keyboard. If they do it incorrectly, I'm going to do the minus sign on my keyboard. I could come over here and click on the screen, but when the student watches you click correct or incorrect, that's not very fun for the student. So you can use minus for incorrect and plus for correct. So got that one right, missed that one, missed that one, missed that one, missed that one, got that one, and we're done. All right, so that's the Z screener. So now I'm going to say next, and it's going to give me the sight words test, and it is the San Diego Quick Assessment. All right, we'll go ahead and look at it while we're here. So the students got to read the word see, so I'm going to say they got it. They read play correctly, so I'm just doing, all right, I'm just doing the plus. So read me, read at, read run, go. They got all these right, and missed look somehow, got can, missed here, missed you, got come, missed not, missed with, missed jump, missed help, missed is, missed work, are, got, yes, and we're done. So because they missed a lot, it stopped. If we'd gotten a lot right, it would have kept going. Then we come over here, and I have to tell the child's name. I'm just going to call it test, and their grade. This is very important because that's what's going to determine whether they passed or failed. I'm going to say this was a 4th grader and that this child is 9 years old. And then I put my name, and I'm going to put Denise, and I'm going to put Gibbs, and I'm going to put my email address, and then I'll put my phone number, and then I'm going to send the results. Oops, I have to say that I'm a teacher. Okay, now send results. So it says your child is at risk for dyslexia, and it said Z screener failed, needs help. And over here it says test reads simple syllables with 5% accuracy. So that was pretty terrible. It says students this age are considered passing if they score 90% or above. On the San Diego Quick Test, it says failed, needs help. And so the child in the 4th grade should have very little trouble reading 4th grade words and below. And so that's our screening results. Now, we're not necessarily at all interested in doing the dyslexia intervention materials. Those are not included in our resource guide, but that's how the screening works. And so we're going to leave that site and go back to our PowerPoint. So that's Lexercise, and as you can see, it's for students in kindergarten through 11th grade, and it will tell you if when you give that test, it'll tell you if the student passed or failed. Interestingly, in the state of Mississippi, they too require dyslexia screening, and Lexercise is considered the Mississippi dyslexia screener. We have decided in Alabama to use multiple tools in terms of giving districts choices, but if you chose to use Lexercise, there is no cost to it whatsoever. Now, another tool that some districts are using for nonsense words is the CORE phonics screening survey. So if we look at that, it looks something like this. I'll make it a little larger so you can see it better. And so we have, this is the score sheet. We're not interested in the alphabet skills. for our grades 1 through 12 students, obviously, but we are interested in decoding. So you see we've got short vowels, consonant blends, short vowels with digraphs and trigraph TCH, and R controlled and so forth, and we finally get to multisyllabic words. And if you look at this, I'll get past the letters and get to the words part. All right, so here we are, and you're seeing that for each one of these skills with short vowels, for example, we're going to have 10 real words and 5 nonsense words. It is the nonsense words that we would be concerned about in terms of our decoding. If you wanted to use the real words for your sight words, you could certainly do that as well. So we're going to let the student read through the words on the test, getting finally over here to the multisyllabic words, and then we will calculate our results and put those on our score sheet. So anyway, that comes also from that Assessing Reading Multiple Measures book that we talked about earlier. Now, we've already looked at the tower, so you see how it works for sight words. You've already looked at the San Diego Quick Assessment. CORE also has a high-frequency word survey that would be appropriate for students up through the 4th grade, and you could use that for your decoding of real words. And if you look at what that looks like, this is also one from the Assessing Reading Multiple Measures book. Oops. Let's go back. All right. So I want this to get larger so you can see it. All right, so you see we have kindergarten list, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade list. And then you have criteria spelled out in terms of how many words you miss for it to then be you're at a strategic, an intensive, or a benchmark level. And that's only through grades 4. So anyway, those are some tools for using in your screening for getting decoding of nonsense words and of real words. Then we have several things for spelling. And for spelling, we've got the test of written spelling 5, which is a norm referenced test. And I have one filled out with a sample child, little Dinah Dyslexia. And you can see that on the front of the protocol, we have a place to put her raw score. We look it up in the table. And for Dinah, who's 9 years old, getting 8 words spelled correctly resulted in a score that's less than the 1st percentile and a standard score of 59. So you would know where to put that on your dyslexia needs assessment. Now you can see on the back of the protocol, we have a place to record how Dinah spelled each one of the words that we asked her to spell. And what happens is, in Dinah's case, when she got, in any student's case, when you miss 5 in a row, you've now reached your ceiling and you stop. So this is how Dinah spelled the various words that were called out to her on the test of written spelling. So that is one of the tools. We also have, and I particularly like this one, the Diagnostic Spelling Test, or the DST. And the DST is available online at no cost. You can download this test at that website that you see listed, and it's got a place for you to write down how the student spelled the words, and then it's got instructions for you to give this spelling test. Then it has sort of a norm table, if you will, which really is more criterion. And so what you've got is if the student spelled 10 words correctly, that's a 2.4 grade level. If they spelled 16 words correctly on this spelling test, it's 3.3. So you've got your little norms there, and then you have the list of the spelling words to call out. So you call out the word, give the sentence, and say the word again, which is exactly what you do with the test of written spelling. In the test of written spelling, we have standard scores. In the diagnostic spelling test, we have grade equivalent scores. On our needs assessment, we have a place to put all of those on there. Now, the word journeys, developmental spelling analysis, this is a test that is found in this book called Word Journeys, and you have to buy the book to get the test. The book's not very expensive, and it is a very good book with lots of good instructional ideas. However, when you give this test, you get a developmental spelling level, much like what we saw in this one, the developmental spelling test, where it gave us the spelling section, it said they were at an A, whatever, and to be at a second grade level, 2.1, you had to be at H. So you get these spelling levels, and that's difficult for individuals to calculate back to a grade level. So because of that, that one's not being used, I don't think, quite as often as the developmental spelling test. So developmental spelling analysis, you only get those letter levels rather than grade levels, and that's kind of tricky. All right, so let's look at some of our screening results with some data. We're almost finished. So here's an example of Daisy Dyslexia and her kindergarten screening profile. This one's filled out with the date that all the things were done, and we've recorded her scores from Dibbles. And she, in fact, got 3 scores that placed her in the well below benchmark level. So the team decided that they needed to recommend a dyslexia-specific intervention for her. They are using Sound Sensible, which is the name of the intervention. This is Spire pre-level. It's one for kindergarten. And the schedule is going to be 5 times a week for 45 minutes each day. The group size will be less than 6. And the team could have put down accommodations. They could have put down assistive technology. In this case, they didn't. And in terms of classroom strategies, the team is suggesting multisensory phonemic awareness strategies, phonics, handwriting, and spelling strategies to be implemented with Daisy in her kindergarten classroom during Tier 1. The classroom strategies are what we would describe as Tier 1 supports. All right, so next we're going to look at some samples with data for older students in grades 1 through 12. And here we have Danny Dyslexia. I do have a couple at the end who do not have dyslexia, and we'll look at what their profiles look like. But Danny is in the 2nd grade, and you see all the data is filled in, and the San Diego Quick Assessment was given. He scored at the 1st grade level in that, so he is at 2nd grade. 2.1 is his grade level right now. He scored at the 1st level, so he is at or he scored at least 1 grade level below his needed score, so that goes in the high risk level. On the core phonics survey, he only got 62 correct, which places him in the intensive level based on the benchmark scores from the core phonics survey. And on the developmental spelling test, he got 7 correct, which is a grade level of 2.1, so he was at grade level on that. So 2, he's below there. When he read a grade level passage, he was only 80% accurate in terms of the words that he read, so that puts him in the frustration level. So he failed 3 of the 4 measures, so we think he needs to be considered for Dyslexia Services Plan, PST MET, and decided to use Spire Level 1. His schedule would be Monday through Friday from 8 to 9, and the group size would be not more than 5. The accommodation that they wanted to make sure he had was extended time. Did not at this point recommend any assistive technology for this little 2nd grader, but recommended these supports in terms of multisensory strategy. Daily implementation of phoneme manipulation practice, syllable type work, syllable division strategies, SOS spelling strategies, and they're going to use preventing academic failure for handwriting strategies. So those were the classroom supports to give this student in Tier 1 based on the PST's recommendations. Now, Debbie Dyslexia is a little older. She's our middle school child. I tried to set this up so that we would have an elementary, middle, and a high school student. And so you can see with Debbie, and I should change that 5th grade to 6th grade because she is in the 6th grade. And so with Debbie, she scored below in the high risk area for all of those indicators in our screening with 65% accuracy when she's asked to read a 6th grade passage. And so we gave her the placement test actually for Spire, and she tested into level 3. Going to be getting the intervention Monday through Friday. They were able to put the time from 1 to 2 and group size of 5. Extended time is the accommodation they listed, and then also Read and Write for Google Chrome as the technology, and Bookshare also as technology for text-to-speech. For speech-to-text, meaning we talk into the device and it writes what we said, Read and Write for Google Chrome will work for that, and the team recommended that. In terms of multisensory strategies to support her in her classroom content area things every day, daily, in all content classes, multisensory vocabulary strategies, including morphology clues, multisensory comprehension strategies, and we'll be having webinars available on those hopefully shortly. Now for our high school student, Diane Dyslexia, you see the people that are on her team and you see her scores. She was able to get a standard score of 85 on the tower and a standard score of 82 for phonemic decoding. And then for spelling, she got a standard score of 74 on the test of written spelling. When she read a grade level passage that was created by through Intervention Central, she could only read it with 73% accuracy. So she was below in all of the skills, scored in the gray boxes in all 4 skills. So that the problem-solving team recommended that the intervention for her would be rewards, which is one of the ones listed in the resource guide. They're going to be using the rewards at the secondary level, and she'll be scheduled Monday through Friday for the intervention block that's available at her school, and that's a 45-minute period. The group size will be 15. So, accommodations, extended time, Read and Write for Google Chrome for assistive technology for text-to-speech, and Bookshare. Read and Write for Google Chrome for speech-to-text. For her classroom strategies, multisensory vocabulary and comprehension strategies in small group activities in all content areas. So those are the students who fail the dyslexia screening. Now, Candy Comprehension is a student who did not fail the dyslexia screening. She actually passed the dyslexia screening, and she's in 2nd grade, and she actually read words very efficiently. She was fine with phonemic decoding, and her spelling was not a problem. She was at 96% accuracy when she read her grade level passage. So she was really a student who passed the dyslexia screening, and dyslexia intervention is not needed at this time. Because of some concerns about comprehension and vocabulary, because she failed the universal screener, which in this district was STAR, which does screen for a student particularly in the area of comprehension and vocabulary quite well, that the team decided that maybe she needed Tier 2 support for comprehension and vocabulary. That came from the results of the universal screener, not the dyslexia screener. So you can see no dyslexia intervention is recommended, no assistive technology, no accommodations, and no classroom multisensory strategies because of her performance on the dyslexia screening. Now, Stan Strugler, who's in the 6th grade, a little bit different story for him. He passed the screening, technically, but he did score, this 6th grader was only able to do sight words at a 4th grade level, did okay with phonemic decoding, though, and with spelling, but was only able to read his 6th grade passage with 87% accuracy. So that seemed to be a concern to the team. So because he passed the dyslexia screening, the PST decided did not need to have the more intensive level of dyslexia intervention, but instead went with the rewards program, which is for older students. Because he's in middle school, the intermediate program was there. This works, the rewards program is an intervention that focuses exclusively on being able to read and decode fluently multisyllabic words. And so with that, we've got the idea that for Stan, our struggler, we want him to be getting rewards, even though he technically passed the dyslexia screener. It's going to be scheduled during an intervention block at this middle school, which is referred to as Tiger Time, and the group size will be 12 in this case. Assistive technology, he passed the screening, but the team felt like it would still be helpful for him to utilize Read and Write for Google Chrome and for both text-to-speech and speech-to-text. He passed the screening, but because of some of the struggles that Stan is having, the team felt like that it'd be helpful for him to have support in his content classes through vocabulary and morphology clues, and then comprehension strategies. So the point that I'm trying to make with this particular student's example is that when a student fails a dyslexia screening, when they pass a dyslexia screening, we can still make recommendations. They're not considered to be dyslexia services recommendations. So whether you decided to go ahead and use this form or to create another form is really kind of irrelevant. But in determining what skills you want to target for this and what supports you want to provide, failing the screening would result in the ones you saw at the beginning of these examples with a bona fide dyslexia services plan. Passing might wind up with the student getting supports, but not to the extent of it being considered to be dyslexia services. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. All right, so after the screening is completed, the PST needs to consider the results and determine the services to be provided for the student. If the student fails both the universal screening and the dyslexia screening, then the team will determine what dyslexia services are needed and develop the plan, just like we saw in those examples. If, however, the student fails the universal screening but passes the dyslexia screening, then the team needs to still decide what supports are needed, but the student wouldn't necessarily be in line for dyslexia services. For more information about dyslexia services plan, there's a lot of information in the resource guide about dyslexia services plans, and also there's information in a webinar about dyslexia services plan. Thank you for your interest in dyslexia, and I hope this has been helpful to you. If you would like to find additional information from the resource guide or webinars that are available at the State Department website, I hope you'll have an easy time finding what you need. Thanks, and have a blessed day.